If I look back to 10 years for the evolution of threats, it's changed quite dramatically. 10 years ago, the threats I was looking at was mostly PC-based, right? A lot of Windows XP type of born threats, typical things like banking trojans, phishing attacks. We still certainly see that. So when I talk about the evolution of threats, we still have all the threats that we saw in the past, and that continues to happen in big fashion. But now we're dealing with an exponential rise, just in terms of malware. We're getting north of 1 million virus samples a day, over 50 billion potential threat events that we have to monitor at FortiGuard labs across the globe. That's a big change compared to 10 years ago. What's driving that is automation on the bad guys' side, the black hat attackers. Threats are continuing to evolve by themselves, by machines. That drives up a lot of the different threats and attacks we see. On top of that, the key way that threats have evolved is not just through malware, but through all of these different ways that they can penetrate into systems. So this is what we talk about the attack surface. That's the big change, and that's a natural evolution due to infrastructure. Cyber criminals will always follow the path of least resistance. It used to just be Windows. That's dramatically changed now to mobile. Android malware, 10% of all the viruses we see are now related to Android because of that attack surface. And if we look at attack surface today, it includes IoT, the world around us, it's everywhere. This includes everything from IP security cameras, printers, smart television, smart homes, smart cities and grids. This is how it's evolved over the last 10 years.
So, whenever an organization decides to put some of its data into the cloud, they're essentially transferring the responsibility for the security to the cloud provider. And this brings a whole set of potential issues for them, because they have to think about, does the cloud provider have sufficient security for their needs? In practice, in most cases, reputable cloud providers, they understand the problem and they understand their reputation, the damage they can have to their reputation if there is any problems with security. So in general, the security afforded by the cloud provider is as good or better than most small to medium enterprises and even some large enterprises. So generally speaking, the problems of security from the cloud provider are not really too much to worry about for the users. That said, I can tell you that from our surveys that we did this year in FortiGuard, we saw that of those customers of ours who are using cloud services, there was absolutely no correlation between the use of those services and the number of infections or of attacks that they experienced. So, this tells us that putting your data in the cloud really has no impact on the attacks or on the number of infections that you're likely to see on your network.
In the future, continue the attack surface to continue to expand. If we look at just what's happening now in terms of technology, one of the key targets is certainly healthcare. There's critical care networks hooked up to human lives. That's the main key theme difference from before. We're talking about human lives now being involved with healthcare. Also smart vehicles. If you look at a smart vehicle system, it has 3G, 4G, LTE, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all these connectivities as well. Critical infrastructure. We have to separate IoT from OT. Operational technology is a very big threat movement, I think, in the future. On top of that, if we look at, outside of attack surface, there's a really big adoption of new technologies from cyber criminals. I think that the threat actor profile is going to continue to expand. So now not just cyber crime, we're dealing with cyber hacktivists, so political motivation. We're dealing with cyber warfare, state-sponsored attacks, expect to see more of that. And on top of that now, I think we're going to see a very active new genre of cyber terrorism. We all unfortunately read about terrorism in the news almost every week, and cyber is a very applicable part about that. So I think we're going to see more advances in that. Critical infrastructure in the crosshairs as well, and ransom of commercial services. We've already seen one attack this year. I expect to see a lot more of that in the coming years. These are big paydays for cyber criminals. We're talking about $1 million, $2 million, revenue streams going after the crown jewels of corporate assets. And so organizations are really going to have to adapt to that, protect their crown jewels, realize what their revenue services are, and that cyber criminals are going to be coming after them.
So with IoT, we're connecting more and more things to the internet. This is bringing a lot of new opportunities for our customers, but at the same time, it's bringing a much bigger attack surface for the cyber criminal. So cyber criminals are looking at IoT as a new opportunity to build more creative attacks. And we saw this last year with the Mirai botnet. With the Mirai botnet, using video cameras, simple devices, they were able to build the biggest DDoS attack that we've seen so far. And I think in the future we can expect to see similar attacks, but more intelligent attacks where instead of just every device doing exactly the same thing and focusing on the same target, we expect to see devices, compromised IoT devices, communicating with each other and building much more complex attacks. So in Fortinet, we're using more and more artificial intelligence in the back end to classify malware, to build signatures, in order to protect, to build the protection that we need to push down to the devices to protect our customers. And you know, as the cyber criminals look at artificial intelligence, we have to do the same in order to keep that cat and mouse game alive and to make sure we always stay one step ahead.